I've been at CGI since for about 14 years, 15 years, and initially I was it worked a lot in the rail sector for about 8 years doing various software implementations. I then moved on to work in HR transformation, doing a number of different implementations for customers, and now in the last 8 years I've been working in space. And through that entire period of over 15 years of experience in software delivery, I've used a number of different open source projects in a number of different domains, and read through my share of licenses and software development practices as I've seen this very exciting area of software development progress. So what is open source? So the definition by Wikipedia is open source is a type of computer software in which source code is released under a license in which the copyright holder grants users the right to study, to change, and to distribute the software to anyone and for any purpose. Now, this is really powerful because it enables the community as a whole to contribute towards a common piece of software, to make it better, to learn how the software works by being able to see it, to effectively practice your computer programming and deliver to a common purpose that a piece of software might have. There's a really great TED talk if you get a chance to see it, which has been illustrated on the rsa.org. It's called Drive is the name of the talk. So if you ever get a chance, have a look at that, because it really sort of crystallizes this purpose, this software with a purpose that a lot of open source comes from. So to give you a bit of the history of open source, so if we go all the way back to really the beginning of the IT industry, so 1950s and 60s, when the computers are really first invented, and computer software was almost bundled in free with the hardware that you bought, and it was distributed with the computer. And a lot of universities were early adopters of computing technology, and many of the modifications that universities made to this software were openly shared, really aligned to the sort of academic principles of sharing knowledge. So organizations sprung up to facilitate sharing, of such as the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and the University of California at Berkeley, which those names will come up again later in the presentation, and it'll be interesting for you to see why. So as large-scale operating system matured, fewer and fewer organizations allowed modifications to the operating software, and eventually many operating systems were actually closed to modification. However, the ball had started to roll, and the idea had been sown of this concept of being able to collaborate together using, to develop and further software. So then in the early 1970s, AT&T and Sun Microsystems distributed early versions of a product called Unix at no cost to government and academic researchers. And these versions, they didn't come with a permission to redistribute or to distribute modified versions, and were thus not free software in the modern meaning of the phrase. But after Unix became more widespread use in the 1980s, AT&T actually stopped the free distribution and started to charge for system patches. And this really, sort of started to change this behavior, and you started to see real silos emerging with people not sharing their software. So along comes this guy called Richard Stallman. He was a graduate at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT as it's called, where the early versions of Unix had first been developed. And he then created this concept called GNU, which stands for generally not Unix, GNU not Unix. It's effectively a recursive acronym, but he was really concerned that he could no longer study or modify programs that were initially written by others, and Stallman viewed this practice as fundamentally wrong and effectively slowing the development of computers by siloing knowledge and not facilitating that collaboration. So that GNU was facilitated in 1983 so that people could use computers, and GNU was aimed at being a complete operating system free from the constraints on use of its source code. And Stallman started bringing together all sorts of different projects under the GNU project, but one thing eluded him. the all-important operating system kernel. And there have been a number of developers that have been working on something called GNU Herd, and it had run into a number of problems one after each other. But then along comes another guy, something called Linus Benedict Torvalds. Now, he was a Finnish graduate working on something called Linux. And after he saw Robert Stallman present at a conference, he was really enthused by this, and he actually then met and discussed, the GNU project and the kind of licensing with Richard, and lo and behold, on February 1992, after about 12 releases of the Linux kernel, Linus Benedict Torvalds actually decided to release it under GPL, and then GNU, the first truly open source operating system, was born. So now I'm just going to give you a bit of an understanding about the 5 different open source types in order of usage. So this information has come from a study done by Black Duck. Have a look on Google about what they do. They do some good stuff to help you scan for open source information that might be in your code base. So the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MSc, and the Internet Software Consortium, ISE licenses make up 48% based on the statistics got by Black Duck. And the principal aspects of this license is that you can use, copy, and modify the software really however you want. No one can prevent you from using it in or any other project, and you can give the software under it for free, or you can sell it, and there are no restrictions on distribution whatsoever. Anyone can really do whatever they fancy with it, as long as it's accompanied with the copyright and the permission notice. And I'm going to say this this applies to all of the information I'm covering in this presentation. The words that I'm saying about each of these license types is my own interpretation. Please do go in, research these different license types and make your own judgment, so that you really truly understand how these licenses can or cannot be used in your organization or for your solutions. So an MSc or an ISC license is functionally equivalent to the the ISC license is functionally equivalent to the simplified BSD and MIT licenses, with really the only difference being the removal of language that really was deemed unnecessary following a creative conference called the Bern Convention. Have a look on it, what it's all about. I'm not going to go into it here, but have a bit more of a look. Some of the products that do this, Cucumber Automated Testing, which is a behavior-driven development tool, Ruby on Rails, a web application framework, MS-DOS, Postgres are all licensed under one of these, MSc or ISC. So that's the most common. So the next one, GNU, yes, so that thing from Robert Stallman. You can see MIT in there as well, the university that Robert went to. So, named after, that GNU is not Unix, that whole, challenge that I was talking about earlier. The basis of this license, you can effectively copy the software. There's no limit to where you can copy the GNU code. You can copy it to your local workstation servers, whether these be your own or at your client, wherever. There is no limit to the number of times you can copy it. Distribution, you can distribute it with a download link via website, via disk. You can print it, the code on paper, whatever form of distribution you want. You can charge a fee for it, you can charge someone for the software, but the principal thing is you must give them a copy of the GNU GPL, which would tell them that they could get the software free from elsewhere. You can also change the code base, but the only condition is that your project containing the alterations should also be released under GNU GPL. So some examples of this one, so Ansible, MySQL, Bash, OpenJDK, but there's a slight, additional term that OpenJDK has on this one. So yeah, that's the GNU general public license, which is about 20% of the open source licenses that are out there in the Black Duck scan. So next one, Apache licenses. So these make up about 13%. So Apache license V2 can be applied to both copyrights and patents. Some of the licenses can be applied only to copyrights and not patents. So just read into that a bit. So rights are never ending. So what that means is once the rights are under Apache license been granted, you can continue to use them forever. There's no need of renewing it. The worldwide authority of rights, even if they are granted for only one country, automatically they're granted to all countries if you're under Apache 2, so bear that in mind. There's rights for no fee or royalty, so no charge neither upfront nor per usage or any other basis is applicable. And the rights are irrevocable, so no one can ever say to you that your derivative of the code that was licensed under this license can't be in use anymore. So it's it's irrevocable. Redistribution of the code has requirements which predominantly ensure that proper credit goes to those who've worked on the code and maintain the license. And some examples of this one, Selenium, Kubernetes, Docker, Apache Cassandra, which is the database used by Netflix and Twitter, are all examples of stuff that use the Apache too. So the next one, BSD, so that's Berkeley. There's that old university that I was mentioning earlier in California. So this software distribution has two different types, a 3-clause and a 2-clause license. It's very simple. So the 3-clause license on BSD allows unlimited redistribution for any purpose, so long as the copyrights and the disclaimers of warranty of the license are maintained in both the binary and the source. Now there is an interesting requirement on the 3-clause, which is that it contains a phrase restricting the use of contributors' names for endorsements of a derived work without specific permission. So it basically means that if someone has updated or forked some sort of like a quite famous person's code and made changes to it to make a new project, that person can't use the person's name to endorse it. And the primary difference between 2-clause BSD license and 3 is that the 2-clause just omits that bit about the restricted use of contributors' names. So an example of this: FreeBSD, OpenBSD, NetBSD, Dragonfly BSD, which are all Unix operating systems, all use the 3 and or the 2-clause BSD. So the next one, the GNU lesser general public license, which is the sort of the 5th most commonly used, about 4%. So this grants fewer rights to work than GNU GPL. So it's appropriate for libraries and projects that want to allow dynamic linking from GPL and non-open source software while preventing contamination of the LGPL license into non-open source software. So it effectively requires any other project or source that is using the project under GPL to also be licensed under GPL. So have a bit of a read into what dynamic linking means. I'm not going to go into that here, but just some examples of software that is in this area is 7-zip or VLC media player. So have a look at that. So if we move on now, so we've done who am I? We've done sort of like a shot glass of what open source is, the different kind of licenses. So now we're on to some of the benefits and the risks. So benefits. So I mean, the big benefit of open source is that we can benefit from a wide community of experts improving performance, stability and security, as everybody is contributing to that. You can also understand how the software works because you can see the source code, you can touch it, you can work out how the various bits are working together. You can also contribute and guide the evolution of a product. So if you don't like the way that it's doing something, you can improve it. And then finally, I mean, this is probably the biggest for me, you can learn from others and you can promote your technical skills by contributing to projects. So I've had people come up to me in interviews and show me their their GitHub account and show the actual code that they've developed at an interview, and that's really powerful. And also being able to train yourself by seeing how other people code. So on to some of the risks. So first of all, as I said before, you really need to understand the license terms in relation to your usage. Get out that license document for the software you're downloading and really read it and understand what you're accepting, by using that piece of open source. So first of all, open source does not necessarily mean free of cost. So there's a number of ways in which people make money or vendors make money from open source. Usually this is via a support contract that comes with the open source, or they provide access to consultancy, or they provide access to environments for testing or other purposes. So those things can come as a bolt-on to the use of open source. Some other vendors, they they provide two versions. They provide one which is open source and one which is non-open source. So then they charge a a license for that bolt-on version that gives extra features or functionality once you've used the sort of the open source version. And finally, because it's open source, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's a commitment from the person who wrote it to maintain it and plug it for security vulnerabilities or other bugs that they might find. So by taking on a piece of open source, you may need to budget for an overhead to actually keep that open source up to date and delivering the functionality that you want in an effective way. So that's somewhat of an indirect cost that people don't always appreciate. So next, be mindful of what open source you download and use. Your employer may not agree with usage, but usually most employers, like CGI, they have a structured way of monitoring the open source that's in use and providing guidance and open source experts that people can discuss usage with, so that you can be confident that you're using it in line with your employer and your client's expectations. Finally, you may need to distribute your code to the end customer if linked with an open source component. So just, again, just look into those license terms and just understand, what needs to be distributed as a result of any bespoke updates you're doing, and understand those concepts like dynamic linking and so forth when you're developing your code. So next, open source technologies that are in demand. So operating systems, first of all. So there you got it. Yep, Linux and its various distributions, or distros as they're called. CentOS, which is a free to use. Red Hat Linux, which of course has some other services that you can buy with it, and Ubuntu for local machine use. So visualization, containerization, and microservices. We're seeing demand for Spring Boot to aid with Java Spring development. Swagger for really simplifying API development, and then the various containerization and container management solutions, Docker, and then Kubernetes and OpenShift with the open source element of OpenShift, which is OKD. So we're also seeing, as things need to be more automated in the lights of agile projects and DevOps. We've got Ansible, with a lot of experience and demand for that. Also Puppet for those software where Ansible doesn't really tick all the boxes. And then in automated testing with BDD, that business-driven development, Cucumber language is really in demand, and then Selenium to effectively automate those BDD scripts. In the database world, so Postgres, Cassandra, MongoDB. Cassandra is used by Netflix. Those are pretty much the databases that we're seeing, and then NiFi for the orchestration, pull it all together, and then the Apache Hadoop for and related projects with Apache, Spark, and TensorFlow for those artificial intelligence and complex processing activities that are needed, and then the big LinkedIn engine, which is where Kafka came from, to effectively deliver data in a very streamlined and effective manner. And then on mid-tier scripting, Python, the programming language, we're seeing lots of demand for that because it's very effective in a number of environments. PHP scripting, and then Groovy, which is a way of improving developer effectivity by giving access to a number of different data sources while guys are coding, which makes things more efficient. So check that one out. Additionally, on the presentation layer, so AngularJS, really powerful UIs you can build with that, and then the partnership of React and Redux, which has been developed a lot by Facebook for creating UIs in React, and then the state management within Redux. So have a look at those as well. So on to CV and interview guidance. So I've got about 5 minutes left. So here's my top tips. So first of all, this is basic, but you will be surprised about the number of CVs that I get through which have got spelling mistakes or that the language doesn't read through. You know, that instantly creates a strange, impression when it reads off the paper, and it is a very quick way to get your CV, put to the side. Ensure that your CV hits as many requirements of the job spec clearly. So try and have your CV alongside the job spec and highlight the various requirements of the job spec, and then highlight those same things in your CV. So you really try and ensure that the reader, which will do that very exercise, can actually perform that processing efficiently when they're reading your CV and seeing those things jump out at you. Now, that obviously, if you're applying for a large number of jobs, then that is a lot of work, but it really makes the assessor of your CV's job a lot easier. So do try and do that. Also, as I said earlier, add your GitHub name in there so that your potential employer can see some of the code that you might have contributed to open source projects. That's always a nice one. And also just remember that your CV is not the only source of information on you. Potential employers do that Google search on you to try and work out what is out there on you. So do look at your entire profile, ahead of applying for a job online. So next on the actual interview itself, do something that boosts your confidence ahead of the interview, whether this be, it can be something as simple as getting your hair cut or polish your shoes or get some new clothes. It really does make a big difference when you're actually there in the interview, to try and really boost your own confidence to come across effectively in the interview. Also, don't ring up too early, but do be on time. So it's a correct balance. I mean, it's much better to sit in the reception of the office, telling the receptionist to not phone up just yet, so that your interviewer isn't interrupted in their previous meeting and then only phone 5 minutes before. So do try and punctuality, but also not too early on the interview when you're coming up. And finally, I mean, this is basics, but research the news and social media profiles of individuals and company. I wouldn't suggest linking in before an interview, but there's no harm in just looking at the kinds of stuff that they're into and the news of the company. So you can drop those little tidbits into the interview to show that you're really interested and really keen to get the job that you're applying for. So as I said earlier, try and tie your CV up to the job spec line by line. And if you've done this, then that should really help you to highlight those examples in the job spec. So you're ready to speak eloquently about that experience when you're actually in the interview. And I've actually had somebody pull out an actual version of the job spec where they'd highlighted their key bits of experience in there in an interview, and that was really quite powerful because it shows that they were prepared and they really wanted to get the job, and really was showing clearly that they had a good coverage of the job spec. So really do have a look at that. Prepare a list of questions to ask as well. As nothing worse that you get through a whole interview and then there are no questions at the end. It doesn't breed well for whether or not they've really got a good interest in there. So prepare some before, and then you can wheel them out at the end. Finally, don't ever lie or try to bluff a question. Just simply, if you don't know, say so, and then highlight experience where you've learned a new technology or skill in previous your experience. So you can show that you might not know this now, but you have all the tools to quickly learn something on the job. So what does CGI look for? So we look for strong technical experience alongside clear, confident communicators. We also look for a lot of relevant domain experience in the business unit that you're applying for, and also we really want to see the evidence of living our values, which are partnership and quality, objectivity and integrity, entrepreneurship and sharing, respect, financial strength, and corporate social responsibility, because one of our core values there, really rounds us as a company, and we're really proud of a lot of the stuff we do in that area. So you do have a look at those things there. So now we're on to the Q&A, bang on past. The things I just want to leave you with is, we're really, big on trying to find the right balance between all of our shareholders in our company, our clients, our shareholders and our members. And we we questionnaire each of these shareholders at various cadences through the year, always trying to find that balance. And we've got metrics showing how our organisation performs, its clients versus our members and our shareholders. You know, ultimately trying to create that dream, which is what we're all about. You know, trying to create an environment in which we all enjoy working together. And we've got over 80% shareholder application within our members. And we're big on ownership in the company, and as ultimately nobody ever really washes a hire car. That, you know, they only look after something when they actually own it. So that's one of the big ethoses in our company. And finally, we, you know, contributing to building a company we can be proud of, you know, through the varied solutions that we do for our clients, but also in the CSR, you know, the corporate social responsibility aspects, which is a big part of our company. So that's the end of the talk. So hopefully we've got some questions on the topics that I covered through there. So I'll just have a look on the and there's also, you know, Red Hat offers a number of certification courses that are that are good. And as I said earlier, Ubuntu is popular as a desktop distribution. All right, here's somebody asking about where our office locations are. So as I said earlier on the slide, we've got, you know, office locations all around the UK. Space Defence and Intelligence, where I am, is mainly based in Leatherhead, Reading and Gloucester, but we've got, you know, stuff in Bath, we've got stuff in up in Scotland, in Wales, and you know, many places across the UK. So have a look on our website and you'll see all of that. Right, what's the next one? Okay, do you deliver agile programs at CGI? Well, absolutely. Jim Dorney, who's one of my colleagues, he did a previous presentation, and you know, on sort of the process of going through an agile engagement with a client and some of the things that went through in that engagement. So do have a look at that one, which should be available via our YouTube channel. Right, what's this one? You've mentioned Red Hat a lot. What do you think the impact of Red Hat being purchased by IBM is going to be? Okay, right, that's quite an interesting one. So obviously this is still ongoing, and you can find a lot of online material on this. IBM have made statements with how they want to manage and preserve Red Hat, which is really positive. So you know, I'm hoping that will be the way that they'll continue. Right, where does CGI see the IT industry heading in 28 and 2019? Right, so that's a really interesting question. One of the things that we do here at CGI is we have a voice of the member and a voice of the client consultation, which happens every year, where we go out to our members and our clients and try and understand what their views are on the future of the IT industry, areas which CGI should focus, and strategy which we should follow. And now all that information is consolidated together, and that's recently been presented from the last one, Insights in Action. So you can see that on our website. It's available to download and have a look at that. All right, so that's all the questions that I've got on my side, Adele, unless you've got any on your side. Okay, I think I've got some more coming in your side. Okay, Adele, are you still there?
Yeah, so if you just go via the chat box, there's a couple of questions that are just coming through now.
Ah, right, okay. Okay, I've also got my colleague Nick Piper on the line as well. Can you see any of those questions coming through, Nick?
Yeah, do you want me to read that to you?
Yeah, why don't you read some of them out? Yeah.
So, yeah, sure. Do we sponsor visas?
No, right. Yeah, that's an interesting question. Typically, we don't do that for graduates, but if you've got a graduate applications, but if you've got for other more specialist roles, we can by all means apply, and then we can see whether it's applicable and whether or not that can be supported.
What do we do around DevOps?
Right. Do you want to pick that one on, Nico, or shall I?
Yeah, I probably can. Feel free to add something. I suppose one part of this I can speak to is our pathways for careers that we have. So our technical staff can be part of our software engineering community, and within that then we have a number of specialisms. We have an open source specialism, and we have a DevOps specialism there. So we do have internally a community of DevOps people. Within my own project as well, we have quite a DevOps focus or culture around rapid releases, around software configured networks and so on. So the DevOps approach probably varies a lot depending on which project the members are part of. We have some projects that approach doesn't really fit to, and we have many that do. So if it's an approach that you enjoy, there's almost certainly work for that.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. That's great. And I mean, that career framework that Nick was talking about, that applies for all different careers across CGI, whether you're a business analyst, whether you want to go in testing, project management, you name it. And it's a really nice structured approach to how you develop your career with so that you can clearly understand what you need to do to progress to the next level within the CGI career framework. When you actually go through what's called effectively a promotion panel, which you can go through, which then enables you to jump up to that next level in the career framework. So it's really clear, open, and transparent about what how you effectively jump from one career level to another. So it's a good part of working here. So what's the next question, Nick?
Do we see much demand for AI and machine learning?
Yeah, well, certainly in the program that I'm working on, we've got big requirements for that. So as I said in the presentation, Spark and I've forgotten the name of the other one now, TensorFlow, I think it's called. Some technologies that we're working on in that area. Anything more to add in that, Nick?
Not that I'm directly familiar with. I do know that we have probably some groups specializing in these areas, particularly I think in other countries. Machine learning within my project is kind of at fairly early stages. So we're building a quite a big Hadoop based big data platform, and machine learning is part of the journey that we're starting to take our client on there. Probably one final question, and then you can wrap up. Is LinkedIn important in this field?
LinkedIn and open source. Well, that's a good question, actually. I mean, LinkedIn is a great resource because you can find out about so many different things, whether it be webinars to further your own skill set, whether it be hearing about news in domains such as space, which I'm involved in, that you can find out about. You can also see all sorts of different jobs and there's kind of things that people are employing for on there. So there's many facets, and so in open source specifically, I mean the common forums for actually contributing, such as GitHub and so forth, obviously get involved in those, but then to see maybe those key experts, those those leaders in the industry, you can follow those and then get up to date information on those. But as to actually getting the up to date on the various projects, then the various open source projects, then I probably wouldn't say LinkedIn was the best resource. Would you agree, Nick? Yeah,
that's probably the case. Yeah. If if I might add one extra thing about the machine learning. So if people are interested in what CGI has done in the past about this, if you Google for, I'm not sure if I can pronounce the name of the elevator company, Thrupp, THYSSENKRUPP elevators. So CGI had a partnership with Microsoft to introduce machine learning and Internet of Things in predictive maintenance for the elevator systems.
Excellent, thanks, Nick. All right, so I think we're then done, Adele, unless there's anything else that's come in.
No, that's great. Steve and Nick, thank you so much for the session today, and for everyone that's joined us and also answered and submitted any questions. We have recorded the session, so for those that do want the recording, this will be sent out at some point tomorrow.
Excellent. Thanks, Adele. Thanks, Nick.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone on the call.